So, indeed, we are starting the next chapter of the Porcupine year. And they just had this great calamity, but also kind of hopeful. Let's see how they respond as we move into chapter 12. Does somebody want to read that Ojibwe word to me?
What is it?
Adizokanag. I guess we gotta find out what it means, huh? The family had been so close to starving that they had to feed themselves slowly. Yellow Kettle started them out with soup and broth, and gradually they began to eat the meat of the bear as well. Each day, as the food entered her body, Omakias felt herself growing just a little stronger. But nothing could fill the absence that had opened around her heart. She wanted Old Tallow back, and every morning when she woke and realized that Old Tallow was gone, she turned her face to the wall in despair. Nokomis had realized that Omakias would be the one most affected by the old woman's death, and she had made her a spirit bundle to comfort her. She had taken a lock of Old Tallow's iron gray hair and wrapped it in some of the bear's fur. Omakias would keep this bundle with her for a year and offer it food and water when she missed Old Tallow. It would help her with the sadness. Nokomis told stories to keep up their spirits. She told stories to teach them, to heal them. Nokomis could tell the stories of the old times, the Adizokanag, because the frogs and snakes were frozen in the ground. So as the little family mourned and recovered, she told stories to help them gain their strength and laugh again. Nuku, said Omakias one night, remember how you promised to tell the story of the girl who was a bear? She had no tobacco as that was stolen away, but she put a pinch of dried leaves in her grandmother's hands to request the story. Nimikwenima, my girl, Nokomis said. I will tell you the story now. The bear girl Makoons. Mewinja, a long time ago, there lived an old man and woman who were very poor. They had 3 daughters whom they all loved just the same, even though the youngest was a bear. She had fur and long teeth. She really was a bear. They called her Makoons, Little Bear. She was a very good sister, but her older sisters were vain and selfish. One day, while their parents were out hunting, the 2 older sisters decided to run off to a faraway village and look for husbands. They tried to sneak away from their little bear sister because they were ashamed of her teeth and fur, but she heard them and followed them. When she caught up with them, they took her back and tied her to a bunch of tough-rooted rushes growing in the slough. But Makoons caught up with them with the pack of rushes, mud, and roots all still roped and piled on her back. The sisters brought her home a second time, and this time they tied the little sister, bear sister, to a great rock. Then they ran away. Sure, she wouldn't follow them, but Makoons caught up with them again, and the big rock was still tied to her back. The third time the sisters brought her back, they tied her to the biggest pine tree they could find. This time, they were sure that they could get away, and they ran and ran until they came to a wide and turbulent river. On the banks of the river, they had to stop. They stood there, defeated by the rapids. Suddenly, they heard their little bear sister, crashing through the woods. Soon, she appeared. On her back, she had the great pine tree. There's the bear sister, Makoons. My sister, said Makoons, I am not following you because I want a husband. I just love you, and you can't get along without me. I know things, and I can do things. Then the bear sister took the pine tree from her back and made a bridge with it across the dangerous river. All 3 got across. Now, said Makoons, we must be very careful. A woman and her 2 daughters live near this place, and they practice bad medicine. They will invite us into their lodge and offer to feed us a stew. My sisters, do not eat until I do, for the stew may be made of snakes and toads. Just as the bear sister said, a powerful-looking woman invited them to stay the night and to eat. Her daughters made them welcome too. But the older sisters would not eat the first dish the bad woman set out, because Makoons said politely that this wasn't the sort of food they ate. Then the bad medicine woman made a new dish of food, and when the sisters saw Makoons eat it, they did too. That night, the woman gave Makoons' two older sisters handsome new silver earrings and told them to put them on. The sisters did, and the earrings were very beautiful and everyone admired them. The bad medicine woman's daughters had only crab claws for earrings, so Makoons knew that something was wrong. Then the woman said she would sleep with Makoons and the other girls could sleep together. Once everyone was asleep, Makoons slipped up to the girls and changed their earrings around so that their own sisters wore the crab claws and the bad medicine woman's daughters wore the silver ones. In the middle of the night, Makoons heard the woman get up. Then she heard her sharpening her knife, but she knew her sisters were safe. After the bad woman had come to bed and fallen asleep, Makoons rose and helped her sisters sneak away from that place. When the woman rose, she saw that she had been tricked. She had killed her own daughters that night because they wore the silver earrings. Now she was so angry that she took the moon out of the sky and locked it up in her lodge. But that bear girl was good at finding her way in the dark, and the girls kept going. When the sun came up, the woman was still furious. She grabbed the sun out of the sky and locked it up too. But the sisters continued on their journey. The crab claws at their ears helped by telling them this way, that way, and they stayed on the path. At last they came to the village, which was by a lake. The crab claws jumped off their ears into the water and became crabs again. Everything was dark. The leader of the village was trying to calm his people. One of the sisters said to him that her little sister Makoons could bring back the sun and moon. The chief was happy and offered anything. Makoons said that she wanted a sack of salt, a sack of maple sugar, and his 2 sons to marry her 2 sisters. The chief said yes to everything she asked. Makoons took the salt and the maple sugar back to the bad woman's lodge. As it happened, the woman was cooking stew. Makoons sneaked in and dumped the sack of salt in the stew. When the woman tasted it, she cried out that her stew needed water, and ran out to fetch water. While she was gone, Makoons found the place where she'd locked up the moon and released it. Then she hid herself. Soon the woman came back, fixed the stew, and began cooking wild rice. As her back was turned, Makoons dumped the maple sugar in the wild rice. When the bad medicine woman tasted it, she cried out that the rice was too sweet, and she ran out to fetch water. While she was gone, Makoons found the place where the woman had locked up the sun, and she let the sun out. Then she ran back to her sisters in the village. Grateful for all that she had done, the chief forced his youngest son, the handsomest of all, to marry Makoons. He didn't want to, but he obeyed. After they were married, he treated Makoons like an animal, ignored her, never sat with her or held her paw. He made her sleep on the floor while he slept in the bed. Finally, Makoons said to him in a sad voice, "It is clear that you don't love me. I will set you free of my presence. Pretend we are having a quarrel, and then throw me in the fire. You will get rid of me that way." So, the youngest son did exactly that. He pretended to have a quarrel with Makoons, then picked her up and threw in the fire. At once her 2 sisters, who had come to love Makoons, ran up to the youngest son. One began to beat him and tear his hair. The other tried to rescue Makoons, but the flames were too hot. All of a sudden, the flames died down, and out of the glowing coals, a beautiful young woman rose. It was Makoons. The youngest son fell on his knees and begged her to come back to him. "I found out your true nature," said Makoons, "and I will not have you. I am going home to care for our old mother and father. They always loved me, even when I was a bear." She had no power anymore. All her power had been given to her because she was ugly. But her old mother and father were very happy to see her, and they lived together from then on in a peaceful way. "Miigwech nuku, I like that one," Omakaya said softly. She thought of her bear spirit. Maybe she had wanted old Tala to keep her company. Perhaps, now that old Tala was a spirit, she would also protect her. Omakayas held old Tala's spirit bundle close. "I like that story too," said Quill, "except I would rather be married to a bear girl than a regular girl. Would I ever throw her in the fire? Not me, not Quill. If I had to have a wife, not that I want one, I'd have a bear girl who could hunt for me and bring me food." "That sounds like you," said Angeline, "always thinking of your stomach." "Yes," sighed Quill, eating a piece of cold meat that Mama had given him. "It is good to have something to put in my stomach, thanks to old Tallow." Everyone was quiet for a while, and Omakayas felt her heart squeeze painfully. Quill kept on talking. When I was hungry, I talked to my stomach the way that Nanabozho talked to his arms in the story, remember? In spite of herself, Omakiyas laughed. Nanabozho was the great trickster and teacher of the Anishinaabe, and although he'd helped create the world, he was always getting into trouble. Sometimes he got into arguments with parts of his body that would not obey him. Once he'd gotten angry at the Indian, his buttocks, and tried to burn them with fire. Dagasana, said Quill to Nokomis, will you tell us a story about Nanabozho? Omakiyas put some crushed leaves in her grandmother's hand and said, someday I'll bring you real tobacco. Am I saying that right, Nanabozho? It says Nanabozho, so we'll go with that. All right, Nokomis said, here's that story you were talking about when Nanabozho killed his arms.
You're infuriating me.
Mewinja, Nanabozho was walking along when he spied some buffalo. He was very hungry for buffalo, but he only had a knife, no bow and arrow, no gun, so he had to try and get them to come near enough for him to kill. Beautiful ones, oh beautiful ones, he called to the buffalo. The buffalo looked over at Nanabozho, but they did not come. Beautiful ones, let me smell you, he said. The buffalo looked at one another and ran a short distance from Nanabozho. No, really, my little brothers, I have heard that you smell wonderful. I would really like to find out for myself. So one of the buffalo came back to let Nanabozho smell it. Said Nanabozho. It is true, you smell delicious. With that, he struck the buffalo with his knife. As soon as the buffalo had fallen to the ground, Nanabozho's left arm took the knife and said, I'm the hungriest. I want the fat meat. No, said Nanabozho's right arm, snatching the knife away. I'm hungrier. I'm going to take the fat meat. Wait a minute, little brothers, said Nanabozho. Don't fight. I'm hungry too. I'll divide the meat up among the three of us. I don't trust you. Right arm is selfish, said his left arm, grabbing the knife. Left arm is a selfish one, said the right arm, taking the knife again. You two quit fighting, cried Nanabozho. He became furious. He was in a rage. I'll teach you arms to fight. He took that knife and poked those arms all over until they gave up. Both arms fainted and could not be revived. Then Nanabozho could no longer hold the knife. His arms were limp and useless. The knife was on the ground with the buffalo. Suddenly, the buffalo stirred. It was not entirely killed. It got up, looked at Nanabozho. Enjoy my delicious smell. That's all you will get, it said, and walked away to join its brothers. The leave-taking. Bijin's round face popped up under the heavy bear skin that covered them both. He smiled in innocent delight. Mama, he has another tooth. Omakiyas put out her finger and felt another sharp white nubbin that had appeared overnight on her little brother's bottom jaw. He was using his strong teeth on a piece of gristle. Omakiyas laughed. It seemed that he was showing her what his teeth could do. His eyes were on her as he gnawed, and every so often he would stop in delight and let her praise him. When they were starving, he'd been so weak and still, not like himself. Now he was rolling around their wigwam, halfway in the fire sometimes, but smart enough to pull away at the last moment. Dress him up and take him out. Tagasana, please, cried Mama. Omakiyas and Nokomis had made him a cunning suit out of the hide of a lynx that Quill had managed to kill. Nobody quite knew how he did it. His arrows were increasingly sharp and swift. After the bear had given strength to Fishtail, he had used those last 2 bullets to kill well. One killed a caribou, the other a moose, just as he'd predicted. For weeks, the family had rested, mourned, regained strength. Dede said that his tears over the death of his friend tallow had restored his vision. He could see as well as ever. He could see so well that he'd managed to snare a deer. Now, with that meat frozen and cooked into pemmican with bear fat, the family were preparing to travel north. Omakiyas shook out Bijin's little suit. It was turned inside out so that the fur remained next to his skin. Nokomis had cleverly tanned the head and sewed the ears and even reattached the tail. With his little skin boots laced to his feet, Bijin's was a Bijin's, a baby lynx. He was warm as a little lynx, sharp-eyed, and funny as a baby kitten, too. There's Bijin's, the little lynx. Gija wenimin, Gija wenimin. Omakayas kissed him as he stuffed his waving arms and kicking legs into the suit. He sat still and let her tie his makazinan onto his chubby feet. She wound his feet first with warm strips of rabbit fur, then fit rabbit fur mitts onto his wiggling fingers. There, he was all dressed. He exploded out the door. Omakayas wrapped her blanket around herself and followed. Outside, it was crisp and sunny. A perfect day for Bijins to roll and toddle through the snow. Omakayas carried him into the woods, though, and let him play while she made an offering to Old Talo's tree. High up, on a bed of fir boughs laced together, they had put her to rest. They had wrapped her in deerskin and placed her dogs beside her so that they could all journey into the next life together. Omakayas hated to leave the tree, hated to leave her grave, but there was nothing else to do. Every time she visited, she promised Old Talo that she would live as the old woman had taught her, fearlessly, with strength and humor. She promised other things, too, darker things. She swore to take revenge on the Patre. She did not blame the bear for the death of Old Talo. She blamed the human who had caused them all to starve. Today, she told the old woman who slept high in the branches that they were going to leave soon. They were going north in search of Muskrat and the rest of their family. It had taken them one entire moon to regain their strength, to replace their possessions, to organize themselves. Now, they were ready to travel. And that's the end of chapter 12.